You open your eyes to freezing wind, horse hooves thundering nearby, and a stranger yelling in a language you don't understand. Your fire's gone out, your feet are numb, and someone just handed you a knife and pointed at the horizon. Welcome to a Comanche village in 1800. You've got 24 hours. Can you survive? 1. You'd wake up to the smell of horse sweat and fire ash. Not bacon and coffee. It's not even dawn, but you're already awake. Why? Because the icy wind coming off the southern plains just whipped through the teepee flap and hit your face like a slap of ice water. There's no blanket, just a buffalo robe that smells like the inside of a saddlebag. You're sleeping beside 5 others, packed together for warmth, and someone already slipped out to restart the fire. This is a Comanche village in 1800. The camp might hold 30 to 50 teepees, all arranged in a loose ring. Each one is made from 12 to 18 tanned buffalo hides, stretched over 15-foot lodge poles, and set up by women in under 15 minutes. No nails, no blueprints. Just muscle memory and matrilineal skill. These homes weren't just shelters. They were portable, warm, and even had smoke flaps for ventilation. By the time you manage to sit up, you can already hear horses, hundreds of them, snorting, stamping, and jingling with rawhide bridles. Horses weren't just animals here. They were currency, status symbols, and survival tools. Each family might own 50 to 100 horses, some trained for raiding, others for hauling travois or moving camp. And breakfast? Don't even ask. There's no pot of coffee waiting, no pancakes. You might sip a bitter brew of AC, a stimulant tea made from yopon holly, or chew dried bison meat if you earned it yesterday. That's your first 10 minutes. Ready for the rest of the day? 2. If you couldn't ride a horse by age 6, you were already falling behind. In a Comanche village, children didn't grow up. They toughened up, and fast. By the time most modern kids are learning to tie their shoes, Comanche children were riding horses at full gallop. By age 6, they could stay mounted bareback, often without reins, guiding their ponies with nothing but leg pressure and balance. Why? Because in Comanche life, your survival literally depended on your horse. Comanche children were born into a horse-centered world. From the moment they could walk, they mimicked the motions of riding. Their toys were miniature bows, tiny lances, and horse effigies made of sticks and sinew. Older siblings and uncles helped teach them how to fire a bow from horseback, not as a game, but as a way of life. By age 10, boys were hunting small game, practicing stealth, and training with real weapons. Girls were just as essential, learning to ride, throw, skin hides, and manage travois, sleds dragged by horses. Horses weren't just transportation. They were the Comanche's strategic edge. Spanish colonizers and later U.S. cavalry officers were astounded. One Texas Ranger wrote in 1846, "They ride like the wind. Children, women, all of them. They vanish across the prairie as if part of the animal." It's no exaggeration. Comanche warriors were so skilled, they could lean completely off the side of a horse, using it as a moving shield, while firing up to 20 arrows per minute. If you couldn't ride like that, you weren't just unskilled, you were a burden. 3. You couldn't even eat without earning it. First, in a Comanche village, every meal was paid for in sweat, muscle, or skill. There were no freeloaders, and hunger didn't care about excuses. The Comanche diet was built around buffalo, and every part of the animal was used. The meat, roasted fresh, dried into jerky, or pounded into pemmican, a high-fat, high-protein survival food that could last up to 10 years if stored properly. Made from lean bison meat, melted tallow, and sometimes dried berries, it was a complete meal in one bite. But this wasn't fast food. After a hunt, women processed up to 1,000 pounds of meat per kill. They sliced, dried, smoked, rendered, and stored it all by hand. The stomach became a cooking pot. Intestines were cleaned and turned into sausage casings. Sinew was stripped for sewing and bowstrings. Tongues were considered a delicacy, often reserved for elders or warriors. And you? You don't just grab a snack. You eat only if you contributed. Did you help skin the buffalo? Did you gather wood? Did you ride out on the hunt? If not, you'd better not reach into the food pile. There was no individual ownership of food. Meals were communal, but they were also ceremonial and conditional. To eat without earning was shameful, and shame in Comanche society had real consequences. Even children helped. If you were old enough to walk, you were old enough to gather firewood or carry water. Hungry yet? You'd better get to work. The weather wanted you dead, and so did everyone else. You've barely survived the morning, but now the real enemy shows up. The southern across modern-day Texas, Oklahoma, eastern New Mexico, and parts of Kansas. This land was wide open and brutal. In summer, temperatures regularly hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 degrees Celsius. In winter, howling winds plunged temperatures below freezing, sometimes overnight. There were no trees for shelter, no mountains to hide behind, just sky, sun, and storm. And the weather turned fast. One moment, calm. The next, a black wall of clouds racing toward camp, dropping hail the size of golf balls. Lightning strikes weren't rare, they were deadly. Teepees made of buffalo hide offered warmth but not protection from wind shear or torrential rain. Then came fire. Prairie fires could sprint across the grasslands at 20 miles per hour, igniting everything. The Comanche knew how to escape. Burn backfires, flee with horses, or use rivers as fire breaks. But many tribes and many settlers weren't so lucky. And if nature didn't kill you, others tried. The plains weren't empty. The Apache, Ute, Kiowa, Tonkawa, and Pawnee also hunted here. Raids were frequent. Camps had to be mobile. Set up in minutes, packed in even less. Everyone knew what to do when a scout galloped in, breathless and bloody. Grab only what you could carry and move. The Comanche didn't just live on the land. They outfought it, outrode it, and outlasted every threat, natural or human. You're still looking for sunscreen and wondering where the clouds came from. 5. Their wealth was measured in horsepower. Literally, forget gold, forget coins. In a Comanche village, your entire identity was measured in horses. By the early 1800s, the Comanche weren't just great horse riders. They were the greatest light cavalry on the continent. Period. They didn't adopt horses. They built an entire culture around them. After Spanish colonists introduced horses to the Americas in the 1500s, the Comanche were the first to fully master them. By the early 1700s, they were breeding, stealing, and trading them on an industrial scale. A skilled Comanche could ride 100 miles in a day, not on one horse, on several. They rotated mounts mid-ride like Formula One pit stops, keeping speed constant. A single warrior might keep 10 to 20 horses for personal use. Elite families? Hundreds. In 1840, a retaliatory raid known as the Great Raid of Linville saw the Comanche loot over 1,500 horses in one attack. Texas Rangers were humiliated, settlers were left on foot, and still no one could catch them. Why? Their horses weren't just transport. They were war machines, trained to ride without reins, respond to subtle knee pressure, and stop or pivot on a breath. During raids, warriors used their horses as living shields, leaning entirely off one side to fire arrows from beneath the animal's neck. It looked like magic. It was muscle memory. Lose your horse? You lost everything. Mobility, status, survival. You were as good as dead. And you're still trying to figure out how to climb on without stirrups. 6. You couldn't handle their weapons or their rules. If you think survival in a Comanche village was just about dodging arrows, think again. The real threat was this. Everyone else was better armed, better trained, and better disciplined than you. Comanche warriors didn't just carry weapons, they crafted them. Their bows, made from buffalo horn or Osage orange wood and sinew, were short for horseback use but powerful enough to pierce a man's chest at 30 yards. Some accounts claim they could shoot through a bison's ribs. They didn't need guns. In fact, they often mocked white soldiers for using firearms that were slow, loud, and useless once empty. A Comanche warrior could fire 20 arrows per minute on horseback, each more accurate than a muzzle loader could ever hope to be. Their lances, up to 9 feet long, designed to skewer through armor and pull the enemy from the saddle. But here's what would really break you. The rules. Bravery was currency. Cowardice? A stain you could never wash off. Warriors earned honor by counting coup, touching an enemy without killing them, and living to tell the tale. Failing to protect your family, acting selfishly, or refusing to share food, that could get you publicly shamed or even cast out. If a warrior abandoned his horse in battle, his name could be erased from oral history. That's how serious the code was. You wouldn't just fail at the fighting, you'd fail the honor system. 7. You'd be covered in scars, and not all from battle. Scars told stories in a Comanche village, and not all of them came from war. From a young age, Comanche children were introduced to ritualized pain, not as punishment, but as preparation. Trials of endurance were common. In one form of initiation, boys had to run barefoot across thorn-covered ground without a sound. Crying or complaining brought shame, not sympathy. Pain wasn't avoided, it was used as a teacher. For warriors, scars were badges of honor. During sacred ceremonies, they'd endure ritual bloodletting, burns, gain visions, guidance, and spiritual clarity. Some underwent sun dances, tethered to poles by rawhide strips pierced through their chest. They danced until the skin tore, believing this brought strength from the spirit world. And that's just the spiritual side. Wounds from battle weren't cleaned with antiseptic. They were cauterized with fire or packed with crushed plants like yarrow or prairie sage. A bison bladder might be used to store poultices. You healed or you didn't. Even tattoos had meaning. Some warriors tattooed themselves after surviving raids, while others marked themselves for killed enemies, lost brothers, or spiritual awakenings. There was no such thing as body neutrality here. Your skin was your biography. One captured settler once said, "They wear their courage on their skin and their pain with pride." You'd flinch at a paper cut and pass out before the vision quest even started. 8. You'd starve before you learned to hunt like them. Hunting wasn't a hobby for the Comanche. It was life or death, and they were masters of it. Their prey of choice? The American bison, a creature that could weigh up to 2,000 pounds, run at 35 miles per hour, and gore a man to death in seconds. But Comanche hunters didn't just survive this challenge, they perfected it. On horseback, armed with short bows and lances, they could approach a stampeding herd at full speed, lean sideways off their mounts, and fire arrows into the lungs or heart with surgical precision. The goal was a clean, respectful kill. Hit the wrong spot, the bison would bolt, suffer, or worse, crush you beneath its hooves. Each arrow had a unique mark, so families knew who deserved credit after a hunt. One warrior might carry 30 to 40 arrows, firing them one after another while galloping. No reins, no saddle, no second chances. But the hunt was just the beginning. After the kill came days of work. Women, often the backbone of food preparation, would skin the massive beast, remove organs, scrape the hide, and dry the meat. The bladder became a canteen. The stomach was cleaned, flipped, and used as a cooking pot. Even the hooves were boiled for glue. One bison could feed a village for weeks if you knew what to do with it. You don't. You'd get lost in the dust, arrow shaking in your hand, while a 1,700-pound bull thundered past. And that's if you even found the herd. 9. If you lived to age 40, you were a legend. In the 1800s, Comanche life wasn't long, it was intense. If you made it to age 40, you weren't just old, you were a living legend. The average life expectancy for Comanche men hovered around 27 to 32 years. For women, it was even lower, often mid-20s, largely due to the dangers of childbirth, disease, and relentless physical labor. By 14, girls were often married. By 16, many had children. Giving birth in a teepee, without modern medicine or sanitation, meant one thing: life or death every time. There were no doctors. Midwives relied on healing herbs like snakeweed, wild licorice, and milkweed root. Bleeding? Bite on a stick. Fever? Sweat it out in a sweat lodge, or drink bitter decoctions. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Then came the threats you couldn't see: smallpox, measles, dysentery, malaria. Diseases brought by Europeans ravaged Comanche villages. Entire bands vanished in weeks. An 1816 epidemic wiped out half the Yamparica Comanche, according to oral accounts. Many warriors wore protective amulets or avoided the sick entirely, not from cruelty, but survival instinct. And if disease didn't kill you, the environment, warfare, or starvation might. So when someone reached 40, 50, even 60, they were revered. Their memories held oral history. Their presence carried wisdom. Their survival was proof of resilience carved from dust, fire, and blood. You, on the other hand, are out of breath at 30 and just learning how to boil pasta. 10. Their language had no word for wilderness because they were never separate from it. In Comanche thought, there was no wilderness. There was no outdoors. Why? Because those words imply you're separate from the land. The Comanche weren't. The Comanche called themselves Numunu, meaning the people. Everything else, the rivers, animals, stars, and plants, wasn't outside. It was family. The buffalo wasn't just meat, it was a spiritual relative, a life giver, honored in song and ritual before every hunt. Children grew up knowing the wind's direction mattered. Certain birds signaled seasonal changes. Grass height predicted buffalo migration. The location of the sun and moon determined when to move camp. They used over 200 native plants for food, medicine, or ceremony. For example, prairie sage was burned to cleanse sickness. Yucca root was used as soap and shampoo. Mesquite beans were ground into meal during drought. Fire wasn't feared. Regularly burned grasslands to manage bison migration and clear underbrush, a technique now recognized as sophisticated ecological stewardship. White settlers saw an empty, untamed land. In reality, they were walking through a carefully managed living network, sustained by oral tradition and seasonal movement. One elder put it best, "We didn't manage the land. The land managed us. We just listened." You'd panic after 20 minutes with no Wi-Fi and no pavement. They read the sky like scripture. You still check the weather app. 11. You'd offend someone by accident, and it could cost you everything. Think you're socially savvy? Not here. In a Comanche village, etiquette could mean survival, and breaking it, even by accident, could destroy your reputation. There were no second chances when it came to honor, respect, and sacred space. Here's the first rule you'd likely break. Never speak directly to your in-laws, especially not your mother-in-law. Entire conversations were conducted through intermediaries or in indirect poetic speech. Why? To maintain respect and emotional distance. Violate that rule? You might be ignored or ostracized. Touching another person's horse or weapon without permission was another massive taboo. A warrior's horse wasn't just transport, it was an extension of himself. Touch it and you risk dual-level insult. You'd also probably stare too much. In Comanche culture, prolonged eye contact could be seen as a challenge or an insult, especially if done by someone younger or lower status. Interrupt a story or song being performed by an elder or medicine person? That could get you physically removed from the gathering. Songs weren't entertainment. They were oral records, spiritual gifts, or prayers. Gossiping could get you killed. Cowardice could get your name erased from memory. Greed was remembered for generations. And once you lost your reputation, you were as good as dead. So yes, you'd offend someone. Quickly, quietly, irreversibly. Modern cancel culture has nothing on this. 12. You'd beg to go home by nightfall. But there was no home to go to. The sun is sinking. You're cold, sore, hungry, bruised, and mentally fried. But guess what? You're not done. In a Comanche village, nightfall didn't bring peace. It brought uncertainty. A scouting party could return with news. Settlers approaching, rival tribes nearby, buffalo herds on the move. That meant camp teardown, now. And you'd better be able to pack everything you own in under 30 minutes. Teepees collapsed, travois strapped to horses, children mounted, fires doused, everyone moving. Why so fast? Because the Comanche were hypermobile. An average band could move up to 20 miles in a day, hauling families, hides, weapons, dogs, children, drying racks, and meat. Over the course of a year, they might cover 1,000 plus miles chasing resources. There was no permanent village, no storage chest, no safe place. Your home was the wind, the herd, and the saddle. And even when the camp stopped moving, work didn't stop. Women would still be scraping hides, mending gear, smoking meat. Warriors might spend hours scanning the horizon or sitting in silence, listening for distant hooves. You're begging for a bed, a break, a blanket. But there's no pillow here, no plug-in, no pause. You weren't born into this rhythm. You haven't earned their resilience. You couldn't last a day, let alone a life. This was more than survival. It was a society built on endurance, community, and total adaptation. These weren't just challenges. They were a way of life. Tap the next video on screen to keep exploring. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below.